Hi, welcome to Restrocast. Today my guest is Eric Slaymaker. He's the CEO and managing partner at Winger Bros, Winger Restaurant and Alehouse. Eric packs almost 4 decades of journey from being in advertising for restaurants to running franchisees of other brands to building his own brand and being a franchisor. The story that Eric carries is one of grit and perseverance, and also the one where you don't run away from the bad times but sail through them with head held high. At the same time, keep your ambition to grow alive forever. This was a great conversation and great learning from somebody who has been on both sides of the table as a franchisee and the franchisor. Do watch. Welcome to Restrocast. So Eric, welcome to Restrocast.
Well, thank you.
30 years Wingers. Did that sound right? Because your LinkedIn says that.
Yeah, that pause was, I was thinking, that wasn't a question. You were just going to leave it there at 30 years. But yeah, you're right. Actually, 30 years this month, I opened, I can still remember, it was November 22nd, 1993. I opened the first Wingers location just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, wow. November 22nd.
November 22nd.
Wow.
And 30
years.
So 30 years in a couple of weeks.
But before we dive into that,
okay,
there was an advertising, piece before this. That was
my family, and particularly my father, was in the restaurant business also. He was a franchisee of a couple of different brands, particularly going back. He originally was a franchisee based out of Salt Lake City, but somehow he went down to Los Angeles in the late 70s and he convinced Sizzler Restaurants at the time, which was a pretty hot brand at the time. You probably never heard of it, as
I've heard of it. I don't know the brand fully, but
they were pretty hot. They had a great run in the 80s, and he convinced them to give him to sell him the franchise rights to Alaska. And so my father, still based out of Salt Lake City, developed I think it was 5 Sizzler restaurants through Alaska and then into Wyoming also at the time. And he also became one of the first TGI Fridays franchisees in the late 80s. Brought TGI Fridays brand as a franchisee to Salt Lake City. And so I had just gotten out of college, and I went to University of San Francisco, but I did come back to Salt Lake City, and I actually started heading up all the marketing for him at that point. That was kind of through the late 80s, and when I was just a young green pup and had no idea what I was doing. And then just
So you called it Eric Slaymaker Advertising?
I did. I started, and then I started my own small agency, and actually had a couple of other clients at the time. But the entrepreneur bug kept gnawing at me, and in the early 90s, I knew that I had to go out and develop my own restaurant brand. I just knew I had to, and so that's really what. Quick story, but that's what ended up leading to opening up my first, when I went and opened Wingers.
But how was your growing up when your father was doing these restaurants in Alaska or even TGIF in Salt Lake? What is your experience? What were you experiencing? How were you experiencing his life as a restaurateur?
Oh, well, I actually, it did come in. I did not get into restaurants through operations. Um, like a lot. I came in through marketing. And so I think I had a, a different mentality where a lot of the operators, where they're seeing day-to-day operations, I was actually seeing the branding and the operations, or excuse me, the branding and how to market it to the public and positioning of a brand and imaging of a brand. And that's really the direction that I came in. It just happened to be restaurants. I guess it could have been a number of industries, which is the same, but certainly um, I the best way I like to call it. I have an old chef who used to work for us. If you're in once you're in the restaurant industry, it's kind of a sickness a little bit. Because it's just hard to get out of. It's a the restaurant business is a tough business, and not everybody can make it in the restaurant business, and it's hard work, and sometimes it can beat you up. But once you have it in your blood, it's hard to get it out of your blood. And at the same time, I love it. At the same, yeah,
But
you know.
what was fascinating for you, right? So just to be clear, your dad was running. I mean, these were his restaurants, or was he developing
No,
for
they
others?
were his restaurants.
And
Yes.
and you were not participating in the operations or any part of the restaurant?
I was heading up the marketing. I was doing marketing for him. Now,
But then when he was taking franchisees from others, like from the
when he
established
was a
brands, right?
franchisee, yeah.
Yeah. So as a franchisee, you did not have a say in marketing or positioning anyway, right? I mean,
Oh, no, not
marketing,
like a
yes, but
franchisor. No, of course not. Now primarily what we would be able to do is we could still create promotions. We would do a lot of media buying. I actually was one of the primary things. I was doing a lot of media buying in the team,
sure,
whether that's TV, radio. This was long before there was anything as digital marketing.
sure.
And so the old traditional media buys that was how I got involved in that. And
So why your own restaurant?
um, because I saw at the time when Wingers first opened, it was a small the restaurant that I opened was a small 2,800 square foot diner. Now if I look at 1993 and the restaurant that I opened and I jump to today, the restaurant that we're developing and franchising as a franchisor now, there are similarities. Some of the food are original sauces, but the restaurant experience and the facility is completely different. But the one thing and this is still true today, is that particularly having seen a huge flagship operation at the time in the 80s, like a TGI Fridays, I really felt that I saw the need to do something that would capture that same fun dining experience and to be able to put it in a smaller box, if you will. TGI Fridays back in
Large
those
format,
days was
much larger format.
6,500 square feet,
Yeah.
7,000 square feet. I did a 2,800, 3,000 square foot restaurant in a small suburban, which still to this day, even though today we're really Wingers Alehouse, which the bar and beer part of the business is a huge part of our business compared to when it first started. So the evolution has been pretty dramatic. However, our bread and butter at Wingers is still smaller towns, and we have restaurants, Alehouses in places that you've never heard of: Elko, Nevada, Winnemucca, Nevada, Mountain Home, Idaho, Richfield, Utah. And I know you just smile and laugh. I never heard of these places.
Yeah, yeah. No, I wanted to say in my head, I was like, try me, and then I was like, oh shit.
But it's still a bread and butter. We have locations certainly in metropolitan areas, but it is a unique marketing position and strategic position that we have, that we can be successful in markets that a lot of our national competitors can't. And
Why is that? Like, how do
well,
you look at your own? How do you articulate your own positioning?
yeah, we, specifically, we have a average unit volumes that we like to be able to. We have some stores that are doing 3 million plus, but we like to be able to be profitable in that 2 million to 2.5 million range, and even below there, maybe 1.8, so that we can go into some markets that are, say, like a Texas Roadhouse or an Olive Garden, where if they're looking at a new location, they're only going to look at locations that are going to be able to do $4-5 million annually in sales. So we can actually target a lot of markets that a lot of our competitors like that are not going to be able to make sense of. And we've we work on that every day. Is we work on being able to have that prototype that's a little smaller. Our typical prototype's about 4,400 square feet now. So where still a lot of our competitors, whether it be like a Buffalo Wild Wings or some other restaurants like that, are going to be closer to 5,000-6,000 square feet. So we're still looking to be a little bit smaller on our footprint, and where we can still identify markets and locations and be successful where some of our competitors can't.
Interesting. Like, I want to dig deeper into the model and, how the evolution for the last 30 years have been. But before that, continuing. So you started on your own post, your marketing agency. Then you started Wingers 30 years back.
Mm-hmm.
And then what? How?
So we grew slowly. We were primarily just growing in and around Utah at the time, and we were growing with what we would call our original footprint, or our first generation store, and they were actually small little diner stores, and going back to that first location that we opened, it was in Bountiful, Utah. That was a modular building that was constructed out in Florida. They shipped it in 4 pieces across the country, put it together on a foundation, and it was one of those old stainless steel diners. That was the original building, and we built more of those. It was successful right out of the chute.
You still have that one?
Well, we closed that diner because when the 20-year lease came up, that original building, we were holding it together by duct tape, and it was literally almost falling apart, and it just needed to be.
Okay.
It needed to be scraped, and so, but we are up there. We're about a block away in a new Wingers Alehouse, which is about 4,000 square foot, but it's a little larger, full bar, much more. It's our newest prototype now. So, but we are there, and so,
Got it.
So absolutely. But it was, we were growing slowly. I also happened at the same time. I was also involved with another partner, as that entrepreneurial spirit. I was a partner in a couple of different radio stations at the time too, and so I've had experience in the radio business. Also, one down in Austin, Texas, and up in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Like the local radio stations?
Yeah, these were both. They were both independent. They were actually adult alternative music stations back in the late 90s that a partner and I did. We opened our first one in Austin in the early 90s, kind of about the similar time that I developed the first Wingers, and then we bought another station and converted the format. In Salt Lake City, it was still at 107.5 The End, and And literally within the first 6 months, we were the #1 station in the 18 to 34 demo in the market. And so we did pretty well with that too at the time. And so, and then I was developing Wingers. Now, one of the things that did happen is that in 1995, my father died, and my brother was working for my father at the time. And so in 1995, what we did is, and he was still heavily involved in running the TGI Fridays and Tony Roma's side of the business as franchisees. And so we decided at that time, we actually combined our companies, and my brother Scott and I have been kind of equal partners since 1995. And so and that's been a number of years now too. so a couple more years, and that'll have been 30 years too. And
So that business, you still run some of the brands as franchisees?
no, we are completely out of we are not a franchisee anymore. And part of it we've really had one of the interesting things, we've had our ups and downs, is our original diner stores did really well. Two things happened is our original Wingers Diner stores did well, but they were when we went outside of Utah, and this was in the late 90s, we were not getting the same sales that we were getting in our Utah stores. And in fact, our sales volumes were only about 75-80% of what we were getting in our Utah stores. And we had some stores in Arizona at the time, and up in Idaho. And part of that reason is we were in the full service business. And if Utah is, you've probably never been to Utah, Ashish.
No.
Utah's, particularly in the night, it is quite a bit different now, but back then, a lot of our markets, we were doing really well in full service, but we did not have a full bar. We did not have a full liquor menu at the time. We did offer beer, but as we went, one of the things that we learned, and we do in focus groups, is that as we went outside of the state of Utah, that if you're in full service, one of the expectations is people want to go out to dinner and have a drink at the same time too. And we weren't offering that, and we didn't really have the facility to do that. And the other thing is that, interestingly enough, is we were franchising, and then we actually really ran into a problem in the early 2000s, because we got caught up on our not on the Wingers side of our business, but on our franchise side of our business, because we were the largest Tony Roma's franchisee in the country back in the late 90s, early 2000s, of Tony Roma's, which is a brand that basically collapsed. And we were at the forefront of collapse, and we were highly leveraged at that point. And so one of the things is, when you learn, when you've been around and doing this as long as I have, is one of the things that had really hurt our Winger side of the business is, in the early 2000s, my brother and I were essentially about $22 million in debt when after the Tony Roma's business really collapsed on us, and we were too highly leveraged. So we had a couple of options in front of us at the time. And in fact, I still remember 2004, because those are the times you come in and you wonder how you're going to make payroll when you have a huge chunk of your business that goes away almost overnight.
Yeah.
And we could have gone Chapter 11. We basically called up all of our creditors and all of our landlords, and we did workouts. And so one of the interesting things is for the next 15 years, we slowly paid off all that and worked off all that debt. And
Wow.
and so I look back at it now, and I mean, there's a part of me that says, "Oh, damn, we should have. If we would have gone Chapter 11, we just should have reorganized quickly." And yet, I would also say, from an integrity standpoint, I'm proud of what we did, and because for 15 years, our creditors and our workout arrangements with all of our creditors. In fact, I still remember GE Capital at the time. They would not allow us to open new stores or grow. And so essentially what we were doing is, so pretty much all of our profits were going back to pay off that debt.
But I mean, I'm just wondering. So, like when a brand goes down, and you guys were, franchisees, so you still have the store, you still have a functioning store. There are customers who are still coming in, right? If the parent goes down, what does it mean for the franchisee?
Yeah, the downside, the interesting thing is it wasn't, the parent didn't necessarily go down. What happened with Tony Roma's is that brand just started losing market share. So our stores at the same time too just started, the sales just weren't there. And
Because of the news, like what?
At that time, I would probably say a couple of things were happening back when in Tony Roma's heyday, and Tony Roma's was known for they really made baby back ribs popular. Before Chili's ever started doing baby back ribs, it was Tony Roma's in the day. And back then, baby back ribs were an affordable item. Through the 90s, ribs as an overall product became more and more expensive. And I think they just became too expensive. They actually priced, to go get a rack of ribs like you used to in the 80s. And it just became too expensive. Now, the other thing I think was happening back then is you were having steakhouse brands that were really coming into their heyday. Outback Steakhouse and even Texas Roadhouse and a lot of places like that. And they were eating market share up. And so it really made the economic model for Tony Roma's at the time tough. And so we had stores that were highly profitable. Suddenly they were just losing market share in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so we were kind of caught up in that. And so the brand itself, and so we had to sell off stores. We had to close stores. We closed a number of stores, and we basically, by 2004, we were out of the brand. And, but a lot of those we just literally had to close up, and we were left with a ton of debt at the time. And so we had one saving grace. We did have some TGI Friday stores, and our Wingers stores were still doing very well. And so thank goodness those were doing well, because of that, we used those stores to not collapse as an overall brand, and we had to go pay off a bunch of debt, and that's what we did. We paid off a bunch of debt. It literally took 15 years.
Wow. No, but that's but Chapter 11 would have meant, the company to also, kind of shut down the rest of the stores as well, no?
Yeah, I mean, it could have brought in some complications. We certainly could have. An option was to figure out a way to recapitalize, bring the company back out on the other side of a Chapter 11. So that was an option that we thought about for about 5 seconds or maybe 10 seconds and looked at it. But I think at the end of the day, we just said, you know what, we're just gonna gut this one out, and we're gonna pay this off. And it probably still took longer than we thought it would. And yet again, at the same time, and during this time, we decided we really were not able to invest a lot into our Wingers brand, because really all of our, any profits that we had, we had covenants that it was being paid down. It was just going to pay down debt. And so we stopped franchising for a number of years, and until we could reemerge out of this. And so part of that, when you ask that question, what happened, we had a solid start with Wingers, and then we stagnated for a lot of years. And the company and the brand really got caught up in some problems that we had outside of the Wingers brand. And so we had challenges. I can tell you the ups and the downs of being in this business, and because I think I've seen it from all sides at this point.
How many stores you have with Wingers today?
We have 22 stores.
And how many franchisees?
And we have 8 of our stores are company stores, the rest are franchise stores. And we're at this point, we're still a small regional brand, and we're in 4 different states. We're in Utah, Nevada, and Idaho, and Oregon. And we are really focused on moving towards the Midwest U.S. right now. And it's again, it's kind of our bread and butter as we're looking. In fact, our first store in Oklahoma City opens in just outside Oklahoma City in about a month, and we've got a number of new franchisees in Texas. But we did have the one thing that was quite interesting, that we had a real transformational shift with the brand. First happened in 2016 with one of our stores in Idaho. In fact, in Nampa, Idaho. It was an underperforming store that it did have a full bar, but we're not happy with the sales. And so we actually did what we call our first Alehouse test, where we took that store, and it had, I think, 8 beers on tap at the time. And so we decided that we were going to reposition our store to Wingers Restaurant and Alehouse. We remodeled the store. We added at the time 28 new beer taps, so we took that to 40 beer taps, and we re-imaged. I brought in at that point a new chef who would we updated the menu, and the day we reopened in that Nampa store, we were up 70% in sales. And
wow.
In fact, and it's only grown from there and continued to grow.
So that's where Alehouse, came in?
Yeah. So and
the
that's
branding did not have the Alehouse before.
We did not. And so now, as we jump forward to what Wingers Alehouse is today, we're definitely a brand that, in addition to what we say, great food and the experiences, but craft beer is a huge piece of what we do and how we manage that. We want to be when Wingers Alehouse opens up in your area. We want to be the not just the great place to go for dinner, but we want to be the best place that you're going to go have a pint to. And so we definitely have some sports bar elements part of it, but it was at this point that we slowly, over the next couple of years after 2016, then we started taking our funds and reinvesting into our existing stores and converting them into Wingers Alehouse. And so, right now, we'll open our typical Wingers that we open. We'll have 40 beers on tap. We have some stores that have close to 55 beers on tap.
Wow.
The other, and it brings into a perfect example is like, I look at a yard house.
Yeah.
And we're kind of that smaller version
I was actually thinking about your house. Yeah.
Of a yard house, which God forbid, I don't know how they manage 115 or 120 taps.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how much beer they have to throw away all the time.
They're huge.
But that's another example of just huge location. They need big cells to be able to support that. So
Sure.
they go in. So they go into markets and they go into locations where they can support $7, $8, $9, $10 million in sales.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and I think Yard House is a fantastic brand and a fantastic concept. And yet I think the beauty of what we're doing at Wingers Alehouse is we're able to bring a similar type of experience and great food and fun and great beers, but we can look at smaller markets than a Yard House is.
So that's a very interesting positioning. But in this journey of 30 years of Wingers, you're at an interesting point where you said out of 22, how many locations? 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
8 of them are company owned.
Yes.
And the rest of them are franchisees, right? As a brand owner, how do you look at franchisee as a necessary evil to grow the brand, because each store is a investment is large investment, your stakes go higher. Given a choice, what would you take? All company owned stores or all franchisee stores?
I love being a franchisor. I love being a franchisor. And I can say that without a hesitation. And obviously, coming from both sides, we've been on both ends. And we are absolutely committed to being the best franchisor in the industry. And now you're right. Are there challenges that come with being a franchisor and you have franchisees? Absolutely, there are challenges. And because every franchisee is their own business owner, and they certainly have their interests at heart. And we know that. I mean, one of the jokes is that every franchisee out there, whether it's a Wingers franchisee or any other franchisee, has they have their 5 things that they want to do that are specific to their market or their location. And occasionally it makes sense to be able to allow them to do that. But I think one of the things that that we pride ourselves in is, I firmly believe that if you understand how to be a great franchisor, you also understand how to manage the franchisee relationship and the franchisee business so that it continues to grow and develop your brand in the right way and in a great way. Now it's not easy.
I mean, I wonder at times that, unless, for example, a brand that is like growing to 1,000 restaurant target, right? I understand that, probably franchising is the only way if you want to go like 10 to 1,000 in 5 years, let's say, right? So then you're on a different target. But for a brand that can grow, let's say, a little slowly, and especially, with your kind of mix, I wouldn't have asked you this question if you were like a 1 company owned and 21 franchisees.
Sure.
But, in your kind of mix, I look at that you have 2 options. One, you go raise capital outside, have company owned stores, but of course your equity is going to be lower in the business.
Sure.
There's going to be an investor. On the other side, you have these franchisees who, from a margin perspective, you still have a very thin margin. You're only getting royalties. And then you have a full business owner as a partner to manage, right? So if you have like 50 stores, you have 50 business partners to manage who are equally, like, each of them is an alpha in their own market. They have money. They succeeded somewhere to
Right.
have that money. They're not,
Right.
they're not a bunch of kids who's just going to listen to you.
Yep. Absolutely pros and cons. And yet, I will also say, and I've seen this time and time again, so often franchisees can operate stores in their markets better than franchisors or corporate stores can.
But then that's a problem, right? Because
No, that's a problem? That franchisees run better stores?
I mean, if you allow them to do that, that hits your scalability, right? I mean, where do you draw that line?
No. I didn't say they run them the way they want to. I said they can operate and run better stores. That doesn't mean they can do whatever they want. No, absolutely not. That's part of the and been a franchisor for 20 years now. So you bring up something that I don't disagree with. It's been a learning curve because there's been a number of franchisees that we've had to terminate because if they're not going to follow the standards and they're not going to follow all the policies, then they don't deserve to, play in our sandbox. And it's no fun, but a lot of times you have to make those calls, and you just can't let somebody who's not going to follow the system or is not going to operate their stores to the level that needs to be operated at, you can't let them continue in your system. And so there certainly, from our standpoint, there's a learning curve to learn how to be a great franchisor. And I do feel like that we have that understanding now on how to do that. And we certainly have the years of knowing how to do that. And yes, it's always a challenge. And yet there are phenomenal companies that are completely built, with franchising. McDonald's, Subway, just,
Incredible. Yeah.
just a couple examples. And so certainly they have all those challenges too, but they've also learned how to make sure that the stores and their franchise stores operate at the right standard, and they can keep that consistency among all of their stores. And so and they're definitely, and you bring up, you're right, and certainly you've thought about this through my career a lot. There's pros and cons of that. Do you go the company store route where you need to raise a lot of money, or do you go the franchising route? And certainly have had to cross that threshold. And I'm still and I believe I always will be, I'm still a huge believer in franchising. It has to be a great controlled system. It has to be a great franchisor system. A franchisor who is not going to have good control and know how to bring in the right franchisees is not going to be successful. And I feel like we've been through all of those wars, good and bad. We've had great franchisees. We've had franchisees who don't belong in the system. We've learned that how to vet, and that doesn't mean we won't make mistakes in the future. I'm sure we will. And yet, I still love the franchising model.
What do you take care of in the business now?
Right now, my main focus is on our development and growth as we are looking to continue to develop and grow with franchisees in the Midwest, and then working closely with our operations team and our support team and our support system, our president and COO who answer directly to me, and and so just enough to keep me just barely busy. So, but that's primarily, yeah. I'm focused pretty diligently right now in continuing. I want to continue to get better how we can get better at franchise marketing, we can get better at exposure, we can get better at selling ourselves, and how we get better at franchisor support, and all of our systems and all of our training are top notch, and we continue to make our system more successful and more profitable all the time for our franchisees.
What has changed in you over last, I mean, you can, over last 30, 20, and 10 years as a restaurateur, as a brand owner, do you see some change in your thinking, things you were used to obsess about, and have those subjects changed? Have they remained same?
Actually, no, probably not a lot. Certainly, I guess the main thing that's changed is just experience, and as you get experience, and as I've gotten experience, is I think the biggest thing that's changed for me is understanding where our brand belongs, and as we grow, how to position our brand in the right markets and the right places with the right people.
What do you obsess about on a day-to-day? Like what makes you crazy? What makes you go mad?
It is always, no matter how, when you have a multi-store operations, whether they're company stores or franchise stores, is still getting consistency and training down to that last person in the restaurant.
But how do you measure that?
And we're still working on ways that we can get better at disseminating our training all the way down. For instance, the best example is in September we just introduced a brand new menu with 10 new menu items. And we probably, what I felt, and a lot of our franchisees said, we worked on the new menu for a year, and we worked on our new training and our rollout for a year. We had training videos that every one of our staff members had to go through and test off, and we just felt it was great. And then we would still go in our restaurant a week or two after the rollout, and an item wasn't made right, and you just still say, how is this happening? And so when you ask what we stress about, it's those little things. Now, obviously, I'm stressing about something that any customer or guest that walks in and has it are not going to notice. And yet myself and our chief operating officer, Patrick Diesner, it makes us pull our hair out that that one certain item was put down first on top of the plate presentation before another. And so it is little items like that. And these were in some of our company stores that I can't even go and say, well, the franchisee's not training all of their people. This was in our company store. Nobody else would have known this. It drives us.
But how do you keep a tab on that? Like, what's your feedback system?
Well, I mean, and so again, we went back and we felt like we put together a great rollout. But when we do a post-mortem, we still felt like, you know what, we still need to do more pre-training and more sessions where our cooks, for example, will make the items more often. Because at the end of the day, what in our business, when it comes down to making food accurately, it really comes down to practice and repetition. And when a cook in our business gets good at something, it's because they've got a lot of reps, and they just get to the point where they can do it over and over without really thinking. And so what happens, and those things that are keeping me up at night, is for that first month with new menu items, they don't have enough reps. And so they have to stop and they're thinking about everything, or maybe they're not going back and reading the build card, and so they do it slightly wrong. And we, as a CEO or the executives, just say, how do they get that wrong? Well, the truth is the only way you get good at something, you just have to do it over and over until you get enough repetition. It becomes, and it just becomes, you don't even think about it. And so I mentioned this now. We're 2 months into our menu rollout, or since we've rolled out the new menu. All of a sudden now, all of those little issues that we were having those first couple of weeks, we're not seeing those now. And so
what's your window? Like, that's what I'm trying to understand. What's your window of that feedback? Like, how do you know that they were not, doing it right before? And how do you know that they're doing it right now?
So, well, a lot of it is through our QAs. We have a team that's always out doing quality assurance analysis,
like
or
visits,
inspections, and visits. And so a lot of that came up through then. And certainly when we're rolling out a new menu, we're focused on new items. And so now we're starting to see those mistakes go away. I guess the learning curve on that, though, is that we need to, as early as we thought we started, we need to probably even start earlier, and we need to have more training sessions than we did with our team members at the store, so that they get reps in before we go live. And so you asked me the question, what keeps me up? Those were the things that silly things like that. Now, the other thing that I was talking about food, I would say another thing that if I could wave a magic wand, I feel like and this is coming from somebody with 30 plus years of experience in the business, service training is getting harder, and that with our hires these days. If I could wave a magic wand, I would still want to be able to make our service even better, and we're striving to figure out how to do that. And for whatever reason, it's harder now than it was 20 years ago.
What do you think?
And I don't know.
What's your
I'm trying to
hypothesis?
figure out why it's harder now than 20 years ago. It is because I think this generation, they're great. They're great people. They're great kids, and yet I think they also have there's a lot of other things that, whether they're distractions in today's life with all the technology that we have and that we're dealing with, or whether it's just phones or apps, it actually makes service training more difficult than it has been in the past. So it is one of the interesting things that I've noticed, being able to go back 20, 30 years. And so
when you say serving staff, like, is it like full-time, or do you have a lot of part-time staff?
We have a lot of part-time. We have both. And I would say it's a almost a combination, probably about half part-time and about half full-time. And so, but I still want our service to be better, and I still want our focus on guest experience to be even more fanatical. And I feel like we're good. I feel like we do very good. I feel like we're in the top half of the industry. I feel like, maybe the top, and yet I would say that I still feel like we need to get better.
How do you look at customer feedback? Like what's your way of knowing which franchisee
Well,
or even your own company owned location,
yeah,
which one is doing better or not?
one of the interesting things is that has changed because we used to do a lot of secret shoppers back in the day, and you'd have secret shopper companies.
Mystery shopping.
Yeah, a lot of those companies you don't see anymore. And because right now with internet feedback the way that you have it, you really, your guests are kind of constantly telling you on you name it, whether it's Yelp or whether it's Google reviews.
But that really depends on how proactively you read those reviews or you process them. Like, do you do that? Do you have a?
Oh yeah.
How do you guys do that?
Yeah, we have people in our company who specifically go through all the reviews. We try to identify, particularly if we have a review that wasn't good, and we need to try to go in and contact them and to find out. And a lot of times the other thing too is that you really, when it comes to reviews, because and I'd mentioned before, we used to have secret shoppers, and you'd have a secret shopper company who would go in and do 1 or 2 secret shoppers on a store a month. Well, now any particular store will get 100 reviews in a month on the internet, and they're all public. But absolutely, yeah, we go through those and we look at them. And number one, we want to try to, if we can, reach out to those people if we feel like that it particularly needs to be done. And then you also want to identify trends. Because sometimes, when you get 100 reviews, you might have a one-off that this may have been an overly great experience and an overly bad experience. But you also want to identify specific trends on when it comes to service. If something happens, particularly when you're looking at stores individually, like this, maybe this particular location is having an issue with long ticket times. The food's not coming out fast enough, or there's a unusual amount of reviews that the servers aren't friendly enough, or maybe the food's not as good at one particular location. They're just, they're sloppy with plate presentations. Those are the type of things that, you're really looking for and looking to identify. And then on top of that, we have, we have a really consistent quality assurance program, in our company. And I can tell you that when it happens, or when any stores consistently scoring in the 90% range in our QA program, we know they're building sales. And there's really not a situation where that doesn't happen when they're really consistently performing in our QA program. And so it's and again, this is 20, 30 plus years of learning and doing things wrong and doing them right, and learning both as a franchisor, learning as a franchisee, and really being able to hone down to those systems and those activities as a franchisor, which are really effective, and which
you've been on both sides, quite equally.
Yeah,
with other brands as well as yours.
Absolutely.
What's keeping you excited personally? And rather, before excited, what's your challenge personally? Like, what are you trying to improve, in yourself as a leader?
Um, I continually want to be a better communicator, and I always feel like I can get better. I like to in my role, a lot of what I do is kind of a chief visionary too, and it's one thing to be a visionary, which I think I've always had a lot of that. It's another thing to be a visionary and be able to communicate that adequately. That is exciting and really motivates. And so I think that's one thing that I want to continue to get better at, and to be able to really expand on that, both with our team and when people come in contact with, whether it's myself or our brand, that they still feel the passion and the excitement of of what I would just say is it's a passion for excellence. Our mission statement for our company's Wingers USA Inc., but our mission statement is creating amazing experiences, and it's 3 words. It's not be the most profitable. It's not grow the fastest. It is to hit our mission. Is we want every time somebody walks in and they come in contact with our company and our brand, we want that experience to be amazing. Whether that's a customer, whether that's a guest, whether that's a team member or employee, whether that's a vendor of ours, we want them to leave that it was a great experience being able to work with the Wingers Alehouse brand. And
when you see all these heavily franchised brands that are uh, new as well as old, both, they're growing fast, and you know with most of them, or not each of them, has the founders, people who conceived the brand, are at the helm of things. They have hired a CEO from outside. They've hired a C-level team from outside, and they have been able to grow the brand really
Right.
fast. Uh, as an entrepreneur, what's your emotion about it? Do you feel that? Do you think about having an outside CEO, just take over the brand and take it, faster, or do you think? Do you even think about it?
Yeah, I quite frankly, I still am interested in developing a brand where we have pretty controlled growth, but certainly growth. Um, I am nervous about. I really. I can see us where we can get to a point where we're opening 10 to 20 new stores a year.
No, because just to complete that question also, not that all the hired CEOs and C-level teams they're also running a lot of good brands down into the ground.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's not, I mean, speed is always not great, but my question is more about that. Do you think about letting go? Do you think about losing control as a plan, or do you feel that no,
oh,
there's
sure. Uh, Absolutely. At some point, I'm not there yet, but at some point, I'm actually working, and I can. My brother is too. My brother Scott is that we see ourselves over the next not going a year, over the next few years, not going away, but probably just being able to step back and because quite frankly, I feel like we have such a good team right now that if I wasn't there, they wouldn't miss a beat. And so I don't like to underplay because I feel like my role's still important. But at the same time, it's part of it. It's the same thing we tell our general managers. A great general manager of a restaurant is only good if they train their team so well that they become irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether they are there or not, because they know that business or that restaurant is going to run just as well whether they're there that night or whether they're not there. And that's part of my aspiration too, is that developing a company and a team that whether I'm there, good Lord, it's probably better without me there. And so, and I can probably say that with ease because of the people that we've had and we've developed. And so, I can slowly become less and less relevant all the time to the company. And then on the other piece is that you're right, is a lot of, I am a little nervous about a lot of companies where they try to grow too fast and open too many stores. And so certainly we want to grow, but I think we want to have some level of controlled growth where it just isn't, because I've been around long enough. I've seen so many brands where they just try to put as many stores out there as they can, as quickly as they can, to really multiply that growth factor, and
that became the doom for them.
Yeah. So that doesn't interest me either. I think we want to be able to have growth where we feel like we have good control and we're doing it right.
Eric, what's the story behind Slaymaker? How do you get such a cool name?
So, when I was in high school and college, the term, like everybody nowadays is the term, slaying this and slaying that. I go around, I got, my wife went and bought some dishes that say slay on them because that word has become so cool. But when I was in high school, my name wasn't nearly as cool as it is now. So I found it kind of funny that particularly in the last 10 years, everywhere I go, whenever I write, everybody says, "Whoa, that's the coolest name. Where did you get that?"
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, if people start, I mean, if I need to get a Slaymaker, I need to be knighted. Like, it's like a title. It's not a surname. Somebody has to give it to me.
It is. I have to admit, the name just gets cooler every year. Not because of me, but the name does tend to get cooler, and which is the funny thing. Way backstory is that when I actually looked up what the name Slaymaker meant, and it came from England, it is really boring. It's not nearly as cool.
Really?
It is a sleigh is a little tiny metal hook that they used in a weaving kit. And so it was one of their trade names that the English used to have.
I know we'll stick to the Gen Z.
I know. I know it's way cooler. I know it's way cooler if I'm out. Yeah, I'm slaying stuff. Exactly.
Eric, it was pleasure chatting. All the best for all the plans that you have for Wingers Restaurant and Alehouse in the future.
Well, great. It was a pleasure. Great talking to you, Ashish.
Thank you.
Thank you.